Welcome everybody to the second EASA fuel webinar on the new fuel rules. My name is Francisco Arenas Alvariño. I am and I was the project manager of Rulemaking Task 0573, which is the rulemaking task that developed this regulatory package. We have many guests today, and I will introduce all of them in due time. First things first, we're gonna have a packed agenda today with starting with John Franklin, Head of Safety Promotion, and Francesco Gaetani, who is going to provide us a welcome speech. Then we will kick in with the first session of the day, which is flight planning, and just a small amendment from the agenda that we published on Monday. For request from the audience and from our panelists, I will also provide some slides about Aerodrome Selection. We will have a Q&A, a questions and answer around 1:30, 1:40. Those rules are meant to be for the authority. We have EASA Spain as part of this webinar, and also our expert on helicopter rules will join us for that Q&A dedicated fundamentally to authority questions. We will try to break for a coffee around 2 o'clock, maybe 1:50, 1:55, depending on how long is my presentation. And then we will start with a stakeholder session with the implementation plan of EASA Spain, the Spanish authority that is coming today. Then we will move on to a more operators part regarding the implementation plan on the OCC, and to be more specific, training of personnel. I am referring to the OCC. We have a wonderful guest, Peter from TUI Fly, who will explain us this matter. And then we have our guest, NAF Blue, who will provide us an implementation plan, an overview of their implementation plan. In the last webinar, we had Kai from Lido, and Kai is still here with us, and he will be able to answer both Ryan from NAF Blue and Kai will be able to answer some of your questions regarding the implementation of the flight planning system. So we will have two of the biggest providers in the world regarding this matter. Finally, we will have the last break, which should be around 45 past. I think it's going to be a little bit later, but we'll see. But we should start back again into the panel discussion, questions and answer with experts from the industry. We have a big panel today, Ayata, Thomas from Lufthansa Group, etc., where you can make all the questions you like, and we will try to answer more or less in order. For that, please press the button of popularity. You have a special feature to, if you like one question, to promote that question up. And then we will close around 4 o'clock with the latest safety promotion developments by John Franklin. So that's the agenda for today. All right, let me see. So I give now the floor to John for the rules of the house, etc., and then with Francesco. So John, the floor is yours.
Fantastic, thanks Francisco. So just to give you at the start of this session some of the rules of the house, and just to let you know how things will work. So The first thing to say is if you have any technical problems, you can use the chat function in the bottom right-hand corner. I think I get that right, to contact or speak to me if you have any problems. One piece of advice: if you do have a problem, try on a Chrome browser first. We find that works better than other ones. In terms of interaction, we would love as much interaction with the audience as we can get. One of the key ways to do that is using Slido. So again, in the bottom right-hand corner, you should see apps and then Slido. Please don't put questions in the chat or in the Q&A for the webinar, but if you do, we'll monitor, and I'll just ask you to jump into the Slido and pop them in there. Throughout the session, Francisco and our panelists and me as well will continually monitor the Slido, try and find the best ways to answer them. We'll try and cover as many questions as we can, but we have 600, 700 people registered now, so we might not get to everything, but we take them away afterwards and see what we can, how we can use that in safety promotion material and group the questions together as much as possible. One thing we always get asked, and just so you know as well, is we will post the PowerPoint presentations as PDFs and a recording from our Together for Safety YouTube channel on the EASA event page, and we'll email everybody who signed up for this webinar as soon as that's all available online. It probably takes a few days just to turn everything around. So that's all the main points from me logistically. We'll keep putting links and things in the chat, so keep monitoring the chat as we go through the discussion, and hopefully you'll find it an interesting and engaging session. So for the introduction now, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Francisco Gattani, who was the chair of the rulemaking task and is now our head of department for aircrew and medical. So Francisco.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Francisco. Welcome everybody to this webinar, and I would like to start saying that it was a very interesting task that I had to carry out by chairing the rulemaking group. It was a wonderful experience in drafting a performance-based regulation, and today in my opening speech on the importance of the proper qualification of the personnel that is involved in managing or handling a performance-based fuel scheme. One of the pillars for the performance-based fuel scheme is that the operator needs to have the right management system and the right capabilities to run the scheme. This puts a lot of burden on the persons which are behind the process and the organization. We elected, when we drafted the rules, to put an emphasis on the correct training programs to qualify the personnel, and also the experience of the involved personnel. And you can find this in the authority requirements as a sort of a checklist for the inspectors to verify. Also, it's not only the pilots, it's also the operations personnel, everybody who is involved. And today, I'm really happy to see also that there is a specific item on the agenda about the operational control. And no matter how beautiful and effective a performance-based scheme, fuel scheme, may appear in writing, or how beautiful and effective a management system of an operator could appear in writing, if you have the right persons behind it, then it will work. If you don't, then you will have problems. Back to you guys.
Thank you very much, Francesco. So we move on with the agenda. We're going to start a presentation of the, let me see if it works. A presentation first on safety promotion, just a short reminder of what we are doing here with John on regards of safety promotion. It's just one slide just to remind you a few things. Then later on at the end of the webinar, John may give you other information about other safety promotion events. In the new fuel rules, just to let you know, it's available since May 2022. It's the revision 18, and you should have all the regulatory package, meaning implementing rules, AMC and GMs, available in the latest version, as the presentation is going to be provided, and I guess, John, accessible in a few days from now. You can click there, yeah?
Yeah, it will be on the event page, that material, and then all of the other things are on. We have an all-weather ops page for that material on the community site, and we also have one on fuel. So you go to the community site. I'll put the link in the chat to the community site now so that people can find it.
Thank you. And you will be able to click on that link, and you can download the latest revision 18 of the Easy Access rules, where you have the implementing rules, AMC and GMs, on the new fuel rules. Regarding the all-weather operation rules, which is kind of running in parallel, both regulatory packages are applicable on the 30th of October. These, unfortunately, the rules are there, but it's not the AMC and GM. And you need to download this directly in the ED Decision 012. I will try to put, I mean, you have all the information in the chat, which now John is going to display. But again, it's the ED Decision 2022-012/Romeo if you want to search in Google or in the EASA website. Those rules will be available in the Easy Access rules in November 2022. Then more information about next webinars. We have another 2 webinars, one for all-weather operation. That will be the third webinar that we announced on all-weather operation rules on the 20th of October 2022, and then is a third webinar on fuel schemes on the 26th of October 2022. I guess the registration is not open until we finish this event, but you know, in a couple of days that will be available, both for all-weather operation and fuel schemes. So that's it from safety promotion, and then now let's go to the main bulk of this session, which is a presentation on regards to fuel planning and aerodrome selection. I add this aerodrome selection policy as a request from the audience. We have received several questions. Thank you for submitting the questions a little bit earlier. But I invite anyway all the participants to keep posting questions and voting for the most popular one. So that's the reason why I added the aerodrome selection policy. But my presentation is fundamentally, as announced in the agenda, on flight planning, but it's true that aerodrome selection has a role to play when we talk about flight planning and in-flight replanning system. So let's go back a little bit about the concept of fuel schemes. So the idea that we had under the new regulatory package fuel scheme was that we will have like an umbrella, this term, a scheme approved by the authority, and then below the fuel scheme you will have the 3 policies. The fuel planning and in-flight replanning policy is an existing policy that all of you were familiar, and is located in CATO PMPA 150, and this adds up to the selection of aerodromes and planning policy in CATO PMPA 180 and 185, and then finally the in-flight fuel management policy in CATO PMPA 280. This is on the current rules. So what we try to achieve is that we combine into those 3 policies into this fuel scheme umbrella, so that if you are, we can move into a performance-based regulation where the safety objective is in the implementing rule, the means to comply in the AMC, and this allows that to be, let's say, more aggressive or less aggressive in one policy, while benefiting in more flexibility in the others. So if you are very prescriptive and very conservative in one policy, then you can be much more aggressive in the other policies and vice versa. So the idea is that to have a performance-based requirement where we allow flexibility depending on the operation and depending on the needs of the operator. So how we implement this idea that I just described? By creating 3 groups of fuels schemes. The basic fuel scheme, which is going to be the prescriptive requirements, for example, a 5% contingency, where the authority doesn't need a special provisions, special requirements, the operator either, and this should be the current situation for most of the operator. Then we have a variation. This idea of the variation is an idea from ICAO and is further explained in document 9976 in ICAO. And here is where from the basic fuel scheme you perform some variations in order to improve your operation or be more efficient in your operation. The authority shouldn't need any special requirements. However, depending on the variation, which is kind of a closed menu, you will need to further requirements. We will discuss this later on in the presentation. The beauty of this part of the variation is that the agency can create new variation as we move along, and in time we could learn from the operators and from the industry the need to have a new menu, a new variation, and then quickly react to this need by implementing a new AMC. Finally, we have the individual fuel scheme, and here is a performance-based, completely performance-based. As an individual fuel scheme, you can basically do many things, and that flexibility that can be provided in the individual fuel scheme, then probably the operator will transform this into efficiency, fuel gains, which this is good for the environment. So here you need certain requirements, basically on the authority side, but also fundamentally in the operator side. And there's a number of requirements in CAT-OP and PA 180 that today is not the purpose, but I invite you to have a look, because as I said, the intention of this presentation is to focus in the flight planning aerodrome policy, both for the basic fuel scheme and the variation. So let's go to the flight planning and in-flight replanning. My idea was to explain a little bit the background. The rules are available, so I'm not going to go too much into the details, but I would like to provide some concepts and some background information on why we did certain things. The first thing is that flight planning and in-flight planning policy, there's a distinction between commercial air transport airplanes and commercial air transport helicopters. The rules around airplanes are all in CAT-OP and PA 180 series. So from CAT-OP and PA 180, 81, 82, and 85. And then in the helicopters are the same number but with a 9. So 190, 191, etc. So this is the first idea. For those of you that are helicopter experts or helicopter pilots, helicopter personnel, please make the questions you like now. We're going to have the expert that developed these rules at 30 past, at 40 past when I finish my presentation. So you can make questions to him. We should have done a presentation for you guys, for the helicopter people. Unfortunately, due to limitation in the agenda of our expert, it couldn't be done. So, but we will have him for half an hour, 45 minutes here in order to answer your questions. Please keep the Slido open and vote and make those questions. The second part of this slide will be focusing, and from now on, my presentation will focus more in CAT aeroplanes rather than helicopters. So regarding the CAT aeroplanes, the CAT-OP MPA 181 is a transposition from the old CAT-OP MPA 150. The CAT-OP MPA 150, the current one, the old one, it was already very performance-based. So the implementing rule by basically providing the safety objective, and then in the AMC providing the little numbers, the 5%, etc. So that was quite easy to transpose. However, due to several safety incidents and safety recommendations, we decided that although in CAT-OP MPA 150, the final reserve fuel is not prescriptive at the implementing rule level, so is the AMC which defines the 30 or 45 minutes. With the new rules in CAT-OP MPA 181, we decided that this has to be implemented at implementing rule level. It is true that in the near future we will make a new revision of the final reserve fuel, because we are having applications regarding the electric propulsion, hybrid propulsion, etc. And at the moment, that final reserve fuel is only meant to be for fuel, for traditional fuel. So 30 minutes for jet, 45 minutes for reciprocating engine. And we know that we need to make that update on the final reserve fuel. And in rulemaking task 0392, we will propose something in order to cope and plan the implementation of new fuel system propulsions. Another element is that we also move from the AMC to the implementing rule the situation of no alternate, which requires 15 minutes. So for those operations where no alternate is required, those 15 minutes are moved from AMC to implementing rule, but nothing else have changed. Some additional change that I will detail now, and we will discuss now, are the promotion and the attempt from us to promote the fuel consumption monitoring program. We review the safety incidents in the rulemaking group, and we identify Santiago, which was our expert on the safety reports. We discuss extensively the segmentation of the operators between operators that follow, let's say, more the manufacturer's data, and those operators with a little bit of more maturity that have implemented fuel consumption monitoring program. We found that those operators should be promoted and let's say should be rewarded. And we decided to invert the order of the previous regulation. So we promote a little bit more the fuel consumption monitoring program. What it means is that when it's by default, the fuel consumption monitoring program should be available. But when it's not available, you still have the option to use manufacturer's data. So it's a little bit of promotion, but there's no requirement whatsoever to implement, prescriptively a fuel consumption monitoring program. When the operator says to the authority that is not available, obviously there has to be, a reason behind. Then the operator can still use manufacturer's data. An additional element that we have amended is the operational condition to take into account when developing your flight plan. This is the selling point Bravo of CAT-OP MPA 181, and I provide here a comparison between the two rules. So the old rule, as you see, the 0.1 aircraft fuel consumption data, this is already required, and as I mentioned before, now is a little bit promoted in the previous paragraph. Then regarding the anticipated mass, is exactly the same. For the meteorological condition, we have amended slightly the editorials, and then we have included several, one point, the number 4, due to ICAO. So in the document 9976, you can see that they mentioned this element. And finally, the point 4 in the CATO PMPA 150, which is air navigation service providers, procedures, and restriction, we have translated into a much more clear requirement, which is, well, that you need to take into account the expected departure and arrival routing and runways, because air navigation service providers in general was a bit a procedure, sorry, air navigation service providers procedure was a little bit vague, and neither the authority, neither the operator knew exactly what we meant. So we had transformed into a much more clear requirement, and then these restrictions are now transformed into anticipated delay. So I think it's an improvement from the previous one. It's more clear, and that was intention to be more clear and transparent on what the operator needs to take into account when developing the flight plan. Now let's go back into the schemes. So for flight planning and in-flight replanning, there are 3 schemes, basically: basic fuel scheme, variations, and individual. In my presentation, we will discuss about the basic and the variation. So for the basic fuel scheme, and taking into account the performance class A, so which is probably most of you guys, those requirements are clearly established in AMC 1 CATO PMPA 181. This is a transpose, we just simply transpose the existing AMC 1 CATO PMPA 150 with the 5% and all the standard things and provisions that we have there. But I would like to pay attention, that you pay attention to a small difference that it may be passing away if I don't highlight it, which is that both in the implementing rule and in the AMC, we have splitted the old extra fuel term into 2. The extra fuel, which is the traditional way, plus the discretionary fuel, which is the commander's, the captain discretionary fuel. Before, the discretionary fuel of the commander was in the extra, and it was difficult for the authority, and it was difficult sometimes even for the commander to distinguish between what was extra due to delays, due to the flight dispatch inputting extra fuel, and what was really the commander's discretion. We think that with this distinction, first of all, the safety investigation bureaus will have clarity on what was provided by the commander and what was decided by the, what was provided by the operator and what was decided by the commander. And then secondly, this is also a good point, and I am talking now and targeting the competent authorities, a good way to see the safety culture of the airline. Airlines with no discretionary fuel in all flights, then that could indicate some pressure to the pilots. And so then from time to time, we need to, as an authority, this specific fuel part could provide an indication of the safety culture of the operator. The next basic fuel scheme is for performance class B and C. This was transposed from the current CATO PMPA 151 alleviations, and now we just simply transform into an AMC. So I think from an implementing rule, we move this to an AMC. And then for LA2 aeroplanes, is the same idea. This was a provision in CATO PMPA 151. It was a requirement in the implementing rule. Just transform this into a new AMC 3 CATO PMPA 181. For the variations, I'm going to detail point by point all the variations that are currently available in the EASA regulatory framework. The first one, and that we recommend, is the statistical taxi fuel variation. If you want to implement the statistical fuel method, so the traditional statistical fuel methods with 2 years of data, etc., we suggest that as an authority and as an operator, you try with the statistical taxi fuel variation, because you will start playing with the statistics, you will start your pilots understanding a little bit the statistics. There's no requirement whatsoever to wait for 2 years, because in the statistical fuel method, you need to demonstrate 2 years of data. The statistical taxi fuel variation doesn't require a prescriptive requirement on 2 years. So when you are comfortable with the statistics that you have on taxi, then you can start playing and applying this matter. And this is a good way, first for your authority, secondly for the operator, and most importantly for your pilots, to start understanding what it means in a statistical fuel variation, either in taxi or in contingency. In the AMC 6, we have all contingency fuel variations, which are fundamentally the variations that we currently providing for fuel planning, so for fuel planning and in-flight replanning. And they are basically the traditional variations that we have in CATO PMPA 150. However, we have implemented, or we have required, one more element in order to apply to this variation, which is the fuel consumption monitoring system. Again, this was done due to safety reasons. Also, ICAO is promoting the fuel consumption monitoring system. So there's a push to advise and to try to promote that operators implement fuel consumption monitoring system. And in order to apply now the variations, you will be required fuel consumption monitoring system. So if today in CATO PMPA 150, you are applying the 3%, and you want to continue after the 30th of October to continue implementing and using the 3%, make sure that you have implemented a fuel consumption monitoring system. The fuel consumption monitoring system is a system that was already in the regulation, in the regulatory framework. As I said, in CATO PMPA 150, there was either to use the manufacturer's data or to use the fuel consumption monitoring system. So it shouldn't be very difficult to gather and to get information about the fuel consumption monitoring system. However, I will explain some tips in terms of documentation where you can find further information about this system. The 3% ERA, it shouldn't be any problem, because there was basically no change. And just to remind you that the location of the ERA is now in the AMC 7 CATO PMPA 181. The 20 minutes, again, it shouldn't be any change. And then the specific fuel method, which in the requirements, there shouldn't be any changes. However, we move some of the requirements from GM, or some of the provisions from GM to AMC. So now it's a little bit more difficult to deviate. We still require 2 years of data, and we still require per city combination. There's a possibility that in the old rules you couldn't, which was basically you have to do the same type of aircraft for the aircraft type and city per combination. There's a possibility to be a little bit more lean and be able to transfer some data on the statistic fuel method from different types. This is a discussion that if you are interested, that you can submit us an email and we can explain further. The reduced contingency fuel procedure, again, is no change. It's just we moved to CATO PMPA 181 and that's it. And then the predetermined point is deleted. It wasn't specifically a contingency fuel variation, but it was something that was available in the old rules. And now from the 30th of October, the predetermined point is deleted to regular operators, and it will only become available. The name has changed slightly, but this procedure is only available for the isolated aerodrome procedure. So you need an approval to operate to an isolated aerodrome, and then you will be able to use it. Predetermined point. So it's not exactly a deletion. I put it deletion, but it's a deletion with an asterisk to let you know that it's still available, but only for isolated aerodromes. Fuel consumption monitoring program. There's been some questions about fuel consumption monitoring program. I don't know if, because I don't have available now the Slido while I'm doing my presentation, but I think we're gonna have some questions around that. There's been in the past many questions receiving about this. We want to say that the fuel consumption monitoring program or system is not a new feature. That feature was already included in CATO PMPA 150.12 with the term current aircraft specific data derived from a fuel consumption monitoring system. Okay, so although it was not prescriptive and not an obligation to implement this system, it's well known in the industry that many and most of the operators have implemented this system. The new rules, however, provide more guidance, because in CATO PMPA 150 there was basically no guidance about it. And now for the basic fuel scheme, we have a GM1 CATO PMPA 181.c, and there's a few elements that you can, a few guidance that you can look at this. Then for those that gonna implement the individual fuel scheme, although my presentation is not going to go into the individual fuel scheme, just a reminder for those of you that want to implement an individual fuel scheme, the fuel consumption monitoring program is required, and to be more specific, you need to implement the AMC 8, CATO PMPA 181. Of course, although it's for individual fuel schemes, if you want, as a basic fuel schemer, if you want to have a look and, and the authority to have a look and make some more understanding and some of what to expect from a fuel consumption monitoring program, you are invited to have a look on the AMC 8 and implement if you want that AMC 8. Again, it's not required for the basic fuel scheme. Further information, of course, we have today IATA with us, and maybe Stefano wants to say something about guidance from IATA on this matter. On our behalf, on our ICAO behalf as an authority, we recommend the ICAO document 9976. There's an appendix 5 in chapter 5 that you can, there's more information than just that appendix 5, but we recommend you to start in ICAO document 9976 through appendix 5, chapter 5, have a look, and then continue reading this document. And just to conclude, I'm supposed to conclude in 2 minutes, maybe I delay a little bit, a little about aerodrome selection, because it's true that flight planning, very nice, 5% contingency, etc. But the aerodrome selection plays a big role especially on the alternate. And the alternate is a big amount of fuel and a decision that it needs to be made, and that will change the quantity of fuel that you need to take for a particular flight. So just a reminder, the aerodrome selection policy is in CATO PMPA 182. That's the implementing rule. And then we have developed different AMCs. For the basic fuel scheme, is very traditional. We didn't intend to change too much the policy. However, and unfortunately, ICAO has amended or deleted the idea of precision approach and non-precision approach, and have implemented this idea of type B and type A. So although intentionally at the beginning, our intention was to not amend or to keep very lean the changes, during the rulemaking task and after the NPA was published, so very late, in a very late stage of the rulemaking task, and you can ask a little bit more information to Francesco as the chair of the rulemaking group, we faced a situation in which we had to amend completely the tables for planning minima, and therefore we had to create all of these AMCs in order to implement the changes that are streaming from ICAO. So for the basic fuel scheme, we try to follow an existing policy that was there, which was the ETOPS. This is also mirroring a little bit also their Transport Canada and FAA. And we implemented the AMC6 for the basic fuel schemes, where basically you have the option of 200 feet or 400 feet, depending of type B or type A instrument approach operation, together with 100 and 100 and 500 meters increment, visibility increment from the forecast. So you will need to increase for your planning minima 200 foot in a type B and 400 foot in a type A, your decision height, your MDA. And then in your RVR, you will need to increase from your chart at 800 meters and 1,500 meters. I think Lido and NavBlue have implemented this feature. This is very similar to FAA, and if you want, you can ask them a little bit more about this matter, how they are implementing, and if this is already implemented from the 30th of October in the flight planning system. For the variations, we have two basically, and we will require now a flight monitoring or flight watch capabilities. This is an operator requirement, so this has to be and is discussed both in document 9976 and in the definitions and in several places in the new regulatory system. So have a look. We have a few experts today regarding the OCC, which I invite you to make questions to them if you don't have all the answers for the flight monitoring and flight watch capability. Another element, and we have the flight planning system here, is that the need to establish a computerized flight planning system to fly those variations, to use those variations. And the two variations that we describe are in AMC8 and in AMC9. The idea of AMC8 was to use this in the European context. That's why it's limited to short haul, 6 hours, multi-crew operation, and where no LVO approval is needed. This AMC8 obviously is much more efficient than the basic fuel skimmer. And then we have an additional AMC. We expect a higher maturity on the operator, where, for example, LVO approval is required, and even a lower minima from AMC8 is allowed. So that's the end of my presentation. I am 3 minutes late. Now I will invite you to make questions. We're going to open Slido, so I will need 30 or 40 seconds. In these authority questions, we have Adina, which is our ground handling expert as well. We have Gabriel from EASA Spain. So in 30 seconds, we're going to open the Slido and check some authority questions. Thank you very much, and see you in 30 seconds with the questions and answers.
What are you going to do?
So I think we're going to start with the first one. Has received many popularity, and I think this, you know, an authority question. However, we have certain operators here that maybe they can have their view on this question. Can you provide information about the possible postponement of the regulation? The person who has posted this is anonymous, so maybe there's a good reason why. Okay, so this is a difficult question for us as well. We understand that this has been a very difficult summer, not so much because of COVID, but due to the opposite reason, you know, high demand, lack of personnel, etc. There are some arguments as well that the agency didn't publish very early the AMCs and GM. I think we make a great effort. First, the fuel rules, if we talk about fuel, were already published at the end of February, and the implementing rules were published in 2021. So roughly, there's been 9 months for this. Maybe the AMC and GM was a little bit later, was in June. However, we try to publish in different workshops and in different places. We have published, you know, the final rules since February, March. And we understand that, as I said, the lack of personnel, the COVID, the high demand has been on the way. We are having maybe a winter with difficult situation as well. The political situation in Europe is not great. Maybe you have certain restrictions of the airspace regarding with the East countries, I mean, outside the European Union, Russia, etc. And we understand this situation. So the agency has listened to us, to you guys, and we have shared with your authority a template to guide you and your authority for a possible exemption to defer the applicability date of both regulation, all weather and fuel. We already shared this form with your authority. We will make a reminder. I see 35 thumbs up to this question, so that indicates that there's a lot of interest of this. I will discuss with my management to resend again this form to your authority, and here is an individual authority, an individual exemption where you can defer for 6 months the applicability date of the regulation. Is an opt-out or an opt-in, in which you defer the whole set of rules. There's no cherry picking. Okay, I want the basic fuel skimmer, but I want to defer on the variation. No, it's a full applicability and a full exemption, a full deferral of the application of both regulations. And as I said, we recommend only 6 months. We don't recommend, and I know some countries are having a little bit, providing a little bit more time, but we recommend only 6 months. So that means from October to around April, May. And but this is not something that we recommend. So we recommend that you try to implement the regulation by October or as early as possible if you apply for the exemption, and not wait for 6 months or whatever you will require. So try to implement and make sure that for next summer everybody's within the new regulatory framework. Remember that this regulatory package is coming together with a regulatory package on the CSS and on the aerodrome side. So, the whole regulatory package in the broader way makes sense all together. Again, we don't recommend to use the exemption, but we understand that if some of you apply for this. I want to give the floor to any of the operators. If I say something that I don't know if any Thomas or Peter or something wants to add any information about the exemption. So I give the floor to you while I'm searching for another question. Okay.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Francisco, and hello everybody to the round. Just from what I can add from the Lufthansa Group perspective, we have AOCs in multiple countries dealing with their own NAAs, And I would support what Francisco says, that the message from what I hear from my links to the AOCs, which deal actually directly with the NAAs, that the message has arrived from EASA, and we generally have the feeling that the situation is well understood by NAAs, and they are willing to listen if we come there with a reasonable explanation of what the situation is and the threats that we see in the upcoming winter timetable, that they are more than willing to help. That is at least the feedback that I have from the different AOCs within the Lufthansa Group. Peter, maybe you have an addition also to that.
No, I can just, to be honest, hello everybody in the round. I can just support what Thomas has just said. We, as a TUI group, we have 5 AOCs, 5 airlines in different countries, and then obviously we have to deal with 5 different NAAs and even one outside of the scope of EASA. And that is a challenge for us, obviously. I will stress it out actually a little bit later. But what we've heard is that there is at least the intention to help us as operator. We'll still go in for the 1st of November. So we're working towards it, but obviously having 6 months more takes a lot of pressure off us. So yeah. Thank you.
But maybe Francisco, to go clearly into the question, we agree that the regulation, the implementation of the regulation from EASA side is not postponed. It is running on the 30th of October. It is the national aviation authorities which have the possibility to grant a delay for the AOCs, and this is a single application of the AOC at the Civil Aviation Authority.
The regulation will not be postponed, and many operators, I don't know, I would like to also, Gabriel, that participate and how is going the implementation in Spain. But those operators that are ready, therefore the regulation needs to be on the date, on the 30th of October, and the regulation will be not postponed. However, you can have an exemption regarding this and be able to for certain operators and particular operators be able to defer the applicability. Gabriel, I don't know how it's going if you can give us an insight about this in Spain.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. So as far as I know, most of the operators have submitted already all the documentation regarding the fuel management implementation, but there are still a few of them that haven't do it. So I don't have any notice that any operator asking for a period of grace of an exemption. That's all I can say.
Thank you very much, Gabriel. We're going to answer. There's another question regarding the exemption, specifically to Germany, that mentions about Germany. For me, I cannot comment on a particular country. You will need to contact your competent authority and discuss with them this part. Is anonymous again, and could you please update us on the progress of the requested exemption from the German operators, and this is something that I am not going to be able to comment because this is it's a particular country and it's the responsibility of the competent authority to discuss about that. Let me see, there's another question addressed to us, which is about the requirements for the OCC and the personnel. I think I'm going to postpone that question to Peter and to Thomas and to Adina for the next session. There are 2 questions related to that, so we will postpone that. There's another question regarding the implementation of the easy access rules. I saw
this one here.
Yeah. So again, it's an anonymous. It received 5 thumbs. So if I may provide some feedback, not having the AMC and GMs in easy access rules for all weather is demanding, and we understand that. A lot of work is being asked from the operator. In return, EASA decides to do such huge change, it would be great to complete the documentation ready before the implementation. We have tried, and we've been discussed this matter, but it's not. It looks easy, and you think that the easy access rule is done with a Word document, and that's it. And why the agency is taking so long? Unfortunately, it's not like that. It seems that it's just a simple document of Word, but it's not. The system for the easy access rule is very comprehensive, because it's not only be used like an easy access rules and you see the PDF. There's a feature on the website as well, and the system is quite. It requires a lot of hours, manual hours. When it's done, but it requires certain interactions, and updating all of this is difficult. The change of colors, the deletion of certain things that will happen in October, and unfortunately we have 2 people working on that, and unfortunately it's not only the easy access rules of AirOps, there's also CSS, there are aerodromes, etc. So unfortunately it's not that easy as it seems, and we will not be able to give you that. What we can try to do is, and we're gonna implement, and we're gonna publish a new all-weather operation manual. In the all-weather operation manual that we're gonna publish next week, we will provide a much more clear links to the all-weather operation regulation, the AMCs and GM, so you can have an easy click into the ED Decision 012 2022 in order to facilitate this matter. So I think we are running out of time, so I'm going to leave it here, and we're going to break now for 5 minutes only, and come back at at 03:04, so we can start with the implementation plan of Spain. So thank you very much. See you in 5 minutes. Hello, everybody. Welcome again to the second session on fuel schemes, second webinar this year. We have Gabriel with us. Gabriel, you can start sharing your presentation while I am introducing you. So Gabriel Arroyo Rejón is a senior expert in operational engineering. He is from EASA Spain, which is the competent authority of Spain. He's an aeronautical engineer. He's been working in EASA Spain 7 years. However, he's been 25 years before in Iberia in different engineering position, flight dispatching, etc. So welcome, Gabriel. The floor is yours. You can start sharing and let's see if it works.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
No? Wait a minute, please.
There's a button below
Yes.
shared and then
Okay. Sorry, I can't understand what happened. I'm trying to share, but it doesn't work.
okay. If you send me the by email your presentation, I can share.
Hold on, just give me 2 seconds. Let me try something.
Wait a minute.
Okay, he's
Right, try now.
try now.
Okay, okay. I mean, stop sharing.
We saw your screen.
Can you see my screen?
Not now.
No,
No, but I'm pushing share.
now
Now?
something happened. You have the you have there's one you are sharing your desktop.
Okay. So wait a minute.
Okay.
It's okay now?
Thank you. The floor is yours.
Okay. Sorry for the inconvenience.
No.
So good afternoon again. Let's try just to make a brief overview about the process of implementation of the new fuel regulation for an operator. First of all, we have to assume that this new regulation is a big challenge for the operator. We are not talking about an easy deal. There are a lot of new concepts, new terms, there are new procedures, new requirements, and all this information has been embedded in the Aerops rules in different parts, so the information is spread among many pages, and sometimes it's really difficult to find information and to have a global vision of the change that supposes the new regulation. So in order to help operator in understanding and implementing this new regulation, EASA has undertaken some action of support. The first was a dedicated workshop for Spanish operators held in March 17, 22, in which we introduced to the Spanish operator the new rules. We like just to him to be familiar, to start to work on it. And then we published some guidance material, both in English and Spanish. In Spanish is la Guía de Transición al Cambio Normativo, and it's translated into English, and both are published in EASA web, and it's available for everybody. So what we expect from an operator when trying to implement this new fuel regulation. Let's talk about an AOC operator that uses complex airplanes and applying for a basic fuel scheme with or without variations. So far, we don't expect any Spanish operator asking for an individual fuel scheme. So this is the more realistic scenario for us. The first step, it could sound obvious, but as I mentioned before, the rule is really complex and it could be difficult to understand. So the first step should be to get a full understanding of the new regulation, to understand the new concept, what is a fuel scheme, for instance, and to understand the new requirements of implementation. Perhaps some operators could think that they have enforced the procedures they are interested in, but they should keep in mind that perhaps the new regulation brings some new requirements that they should have in mind in order to comply with the new rule. For instance, perhaps you are using the 3% ERA fuel contingency fuel, but now you are forced to have a fuel consumption monitoring program in force. So the operator has to review all this documentation in order to know if it's compliant or not. In addition, some of all procedures that are called now a special fueling or the fueling procedure that up to now didn't require approval, that has changed, and those procedures have become approval required. So operators just intending to start to introduce this procedure, or either if they are using for many years in any case, they will have to ask for the corresponding approval. So once we have understood all these things, all this matter, the operator should define a realistic fuel policy. I mean, the operator should stop and think, how important is for me to save fuel? How is the burden to improve my fuel management system and going to a more complex fuel scheme? Do I have the capability, the training people required to do it, etc., etc.? So based on that, the first choice that the operator has to do is either to maintain its current fuel-related procedure regarding fuel planning, aerodrome selection, in-flight fuel management, or to take the opportunity to improve them. Because in any case, what is sure is that the operator will have some work to do. If you think that just keeping your procedure as they are up to now and you avoid to make any effort, any work, forget it. In any case, you have to perform some changes for sure in your documentation, probably in your procedures, and for sure in your training, and perhaps in other areas of your organization. So those are some relevant changes that we consider that deserve a proper management of change and risk analysis. This is the work, you like it or not, an operator has to do. Then, reviewing the operation manual. This could be one of the most important aspects of the regulation. if we are talking about a complex, an AOC operator with complex aircraft, we expect to update mainly the MOA 817, where it's supposed to be placed all the information, everything related with fuel policy according to AeroPS. So this is the place to introduce the new terminology and concepts, new definition as extra fuel, discretionary fuel, etc., that Francisco have mentioned before. Of course, is the place just to state what will be the fuel scheme selected for your organization, and in summary, any possible changes in your fuel policy. Of course, you need probably to update any other associated documents, such as the OCC procedure manual, engineering operation manual, or any other internal procedure that could be impacted for the new regulation. Next step 5, to check, implement the required procedure. It could be to check if those procedures, you have them in force, and as I mentioned before, perhaps you are forced just to review them to be sure that nothing has changed, and you don't need to show any additional evidence of fulfillment. But perhaps for you is the first time you are implementing this procedure. It's important, Francisco has mentioned, and there are many presentations talking about that in this workshop, the possible impact over the operational control system and over the fuel control consumption monitoring system or program. So if you want to implement any specific variant, such as the planning minima, you need to review your operational control system, and just to fulfill, you have to prove that you have a fuel monitoring system. So it's both aspects, fuel, OCC, are very related. So you need to review them and to be sure that you are in agreement. Again, perhaps you have been using, or you have been having in place, a fuel ERA 3% or a reduced contingency fuel procedure, but now the new regulatory framework asks you for having a fuel control consumption monitoring system. Do you have it? Yes or not? If you have it, this system, this program, just complies with the requirements of ICAO documents, because it could be a wide variety of fuel control consumption monitoring system. One of them, some of them could be considered valid, and perhaps there are a few of them that, let's say, are in-house fuel control consumption monitoring system that perhaps don't fulfill the minima requirement of ICAO. Then, as I mentioned before, if you intend to use the special fueling procedure, you need to apply for the approval to the authority. In the case of airplanes, we are talking about refueling with an engine running, refueling the fueling with passengers embarking on board or disembarking, and refueling the fueling with wide cut fuel. I don't think the provisions of this new regulation are quite different to the old ones, but in any case, it's the right time just to revise your process, your training, etc., and to apply for the approval. Please don't forget to introduce other regulatory minor changes introduced in the new regulatory framework. For instance, there are, Francisco, I've mentioned it a lot of times, the new planning minimal rules. This is something you have to change. There are a new procedure of briefing of flight operations officer, flight dispatcher before assuming duties. Perhaps you have already this procedure in force, but you need now to show evidence of that. There are requirements for the Meteo information to fulfill some regulation MET TR 215. For this Meteo provided to the flight crew at the flight dispatch. Probably you fulfill with this requirement, but again, you need to check it. And finally, there is a requirement for recording the relevant in-flight fuel data for at least 2 years. And we know of many operators that only do it for 3 months. So this is something that you have to check and to amend. Flight planning tools. Another issue that we will be discussing later on in this webinar. At least you need to change your operational flight plan to introduce the new field of discretionary fuel and against the extra fuel all field. As Francisco explained, extra fuel has changed its meaning, and there is a new field, discretionary field, that must be shown in the operational flight plan. So you will need to change your flight planning system. If, in addition, you have, let's say, a more aggressive dispatch software tool, perhaps you have some kind of feature such as the automatic alternate aerodrome selection that should be reviewed now in order to incorporate the new minima planning, for example. And in any case, any operator could have their own tools that could be impacted and that could be updated. Finally, one of the most important things in any change is to perform adequate training. Training to who? First of all, to the flight dispatchers and OCC personnel. There is an AMC that is require a specific training for operational control personnel performing tasks related to flight monitoring and flight watch based on ICAO documents. So does it mean that if I have a flight following system, I do not need to train my dispatcher? I don't think so. The difference is perhaps your training do not need to be so exhaustive, but anyway, you have to inform, to train your flight dispatchers about all the changes we have been mentioning before, the new briefing procedure, the new planning minima, etc., etc. So we consider that in any case, the training for flight dispatchers and OCC personnel should be a must. For sure, you have to provide an important training to flight crew regarding all of this process of the fuel management, in-flight fuel management, the emergency fuel messages, etc., and other technical stuff that could be possibly involved in this fuel management changes That could be operational engineers, ground personnel, etc., etc. And that's all for me. Thank you very much for your attention. Francisco?
Thank you, Gabriel. Thank you very much. Peter, you can start sharing your presentation. As I said, Gabriel is operational expert, no? He's an inspector, let's say, from a Spanish authority. And now we're going to move on with the next guest today. Is Peter Ramroth. He born in Germany, but he's half Spanish, mother is Spanish, father German, so he's half and half. He has, it's quite different because Spain and Germany, we are kind of a little bit opposite. So anyway, so half and half, 10 years experience in a previous company. Fundamentally related to training, but he was flight dispatcher and many other things there. For the last 11 years, he's been in TUI, especially on the flight dispatching and as the main trainer, as the trainer in TUI. So that's a total of more than 20 years experience in the ground handling, flight dispatching, etc. In fact, he's a German flight dispatcher, a licensed German flight dispatcher. As you know, in some countries in Europe, the country requires a license, and he's an examiner for flight dispatcher license. So Peter, thank you very much for joining us. We see you great, and we see your presentation. So if you want, the floor is yours to start your presentation. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. And I will, hopefully it works with the next slide here. Let me see if that works. Yes. So before I start, actually, I would like to thank John and Francisco and the EASA team for having me here and sharing this, our progress and the implementation of the new rules in this forum, from our perspective, from the TUI perspective, and especially from my perspective, from the training point of view, on such an important topic itself. So I really appreciate that from our side and from my side personally. So the question actually which arose was, what did you actually do on this topic? How did you start with this? So sometimes a picture is worth 1,000 words, and I basically looked like that, not with the long hair, but when I had the draft first time in my hand, I was like, okay, what is it? When? How do I have to start? And actually, why? So initially, it was a lot of reading, obviously, and understanding, and to obviously analyze what are the implications and to whom is it actually relevant. So the implications, we have heard it several times already, is on the fuel policy, the alternate selection, weather analysis, the training standards, as Gabriel pointed out correctly, and setting up procedures that you sometimes actually have. You need to either reformulate them in a different wording, or you actually have to have them written somewhere. So that was what I figured, or we figured in our team, and then we had to analyze to whom it was relevant. So both rulemaking tasks then were obviously for the crews very important, for us in dispatch absolutely crucial. Operations control has a high relevance. I will come to this why we have that separated in the next slide. And nav department and performance department in TUI Group Operations Center, it has less relevance for them, but at least they will need to know and they will receive some kind of information or training on it. So, so why is this? Why do we have the separation, and why do we have a challenge with it? So just a small excursion to how the structure is. So as I said previously, we have 5 AOCs. One of them is not in the scope of EASA anymore. That's TUI UK. And technically, here in this building on the 4th floor, we have the GOC, the Group Operations Center, where we do the flight plans. So we have the dispatcher sitting there. And in Luton, we have the Ops Control Center, the TOCC, TUI Operations Control Center, where the operation decisions are made. So we have basically 2 organs that are working together, but in different spots. So that was already a challenge for us to figure that out. So the first thing that we made was basically we made up a team. So I was lucky enough to join Michael Manoli's team he was the project leader for this. So we figured out who was responsible for what, and I was basically appointed then for the responsibility for the training part, working very closely together with my colleague Frank, who is responsible especially for the implementation of all the changes with our flat planning provider FlatKeys 5D. But we had regular meetings every 2 weeks initially, or if I reckon probably every week at the beginning. And then we set up just a timeline. We said, okay, let's see what we need to do and until what time we need to accomplish it and at what time we could accomplish it. This is one that is a little bit further on. This is from May already, because as you can see here, the project started at the mid of January. We start to work on the OMA draft, implementing the new rules, and by the beginning of February. And at that point, the OMA draft was already ready. We had still things that needed to be initiated, like manuals needed to be updated, like the TOCC manual and our GOC manual, the OMOps. And as you can see here, by the end of February, we had to have something like a training ready. So that was basically my responsibility. And we decided within that group that it would be a good chance to align all the knowledge within the flight crew members and the dispatchers and the OCC personnel. So what I try to accomplish is one training for all the groups together. So it is quite big, I think, but I think it has all the information that every group needs with all the changes, etc., etc. Obviously, the crews they need to read the manuals, the changes of the OMA, etc., etc., etc. So so we came up with this idea. So for who was it then? Who needs to have what kind of training? If I just focus now on the operational control part, and I reckon that we're really in a good situation here, because as you see on the green part here, we have a policy here in TUI that the dispatchers, they have to have at least, well, some kind of ICAO equivalent license. So like myself, most of my colleagues have a German license, and some others have an FAA dispatch license or some other country's license. That gives us really an advantage on the training, because as Gaudia mentioned out perfectly, you need to train the people on the new changes, and there is a training standard set in the big book. We had this already done, because everybody, when you start here, you already have in your backpack your license with all the topics accomplished. And the second lucky shot for us was that we are an EASA certified carrier, and EASA requires us to be current on our license training on a yearly basis. So the only, I would rather say, I don't want to say problematic, but only issue that we could probably have was the colleagues in the UK, because there was no, this is a newly established group function, and they had internal training standards, but they would not fulfill the requirements that is now required by EASA. So we had to start kind of two different trainings. First of all, we have to bring the colleagues to the EASA minimum standard level for training that they need for their function as ops controllers, and then obviously on top of that they will receive, in this case, as you can see in gray, these two groups, they will receive computer-based training and the documentation to read through and some questions, and the rest of us, they will receive, or we will receive, a classroom training, which we actually started last week. With all the changes, it's a very practical thing, but I will come to this a little bit later. So in order to create this training, I first had to understand with my colleagues together what are actually the AMCs that we want to go for. I know this is a lot of text, but it just shows you to which AMCs we wanted to apply to, specifically to AMC 9, because obviously this is the most similar to the one that we actually have been used to before. All these changes that come with the AMCs, etc., I have tried to pick them up as best as possible and reflect them in the training. Then I analyzed actually what were the specific requirements, because as Francisco and Gabriel, they pointed out correctly as well, some of the AMCs, they have specific requirements. So I just have pointed out some here. So it says, obviously, the computerized flight planning program, you need a low visibility approval and flight monitoring. And this is actually the reason why we need to train the colleagues, which they're actually doing a great effort, and they're doing fantastic and doing the training. So we're looking at, if everything goes well, to the 1st of November, that everybody is well trained and there. So these are the AMCs that have something like a tweak on it that we needed to look at. After analyzing and assessing everything, we came up with, this is basically the sum of it. We have 55 slides training material, which I do in a classroom. We have lots of practical examples, especially for AMC 9, the minima table, understanding the difference, that it's not important anymore, that it's a precision or non-precision approach, that now we have this 250 feet barrier, and that is actually now the decisive thing. The training itself will be provided throughout the whole TUI group. Obviously then, depending on the function, they will get then either a computer-based training or a classroom training like the dispatchers, depending a little bit more on the relevance that this change has for their day-by-day work. So the challenges, there were many. So first of all, understanding the complexity. For me personally, initially, it just wasn't that clear that all these changes in rule, they clump together to one big big picture or a big project. So understanding that training is relevant now for flight planning or for ops control and for flight monitoring, this at least took me a little while to understand and to put these pieces of puzzle together. Then obviously we analyzed all together what is actually what we have. So the tools, our flight planning tool, our flight tracking tools, what is the capabilities of these tools? What do we fulfill with these tools? We had to see, okay, is this enough? Is it not enough? Do we have to do more on that one? And then in parallel to it, we have obviously the OMA stream, where we are trying to streamline all the operations manual, so that the content of it is in every manual the same. So that was actually another challenge, because obviously, as you can imagine, 5 AOCs means 5 national aviation authorities. And obviously time was a challenge, because as you can see, we started by the mid of January when this, and to my part, this landed basically at the mid of March on my table. So time is precious here, but we're on it. So how does it look like now? So, well, actually, this is from August, September. So as I said, we have started with the training for the dispatches. All the gray blocks are already assessed. So we are obviously in close contact with our flight planning service provider, Flight Keys 5D, and they already have provided us on our test database the changes, so we can actually already see, and we can play a little bit around with the new flight planning tool. The OMA draft with the new changes is already sent to the compliance checks, and I think, if I'm not wrong, it already has been submitted to some national aviation authorities. The colleagues in the TUI Ops Control Center, they are on a very good way to finish their FOO basic or FOO initial training by the end of October. And then if everything goes well, cross fingers, then we will have, we will be ready then by the end of October, hopefully. Yes, so nearly last slide from my side. Yeah, as I said, where are we right now? The work streams have been working constantly on the operations manuals. As I said, they are on the way to be approved. We as a GOC training department, the Group Operations Center training department, have the trainings ready. We're assisting other departments with tools and trainers and trainings as good as we can and with what is required. The training for the flight crews members will start as well shortly. So we have transmitted the information to our TUI Aviation Training Department, and then they will translate this PowerPoint presentation into a CBT. And yeah, but that's not it, because it is our intention to go for an individual fuel scheme. So once the variation that we are aiming for is approved, we will definitely not lay back and stop working, because we want to go for the next one. We want to go for higher safety standards and more efficiency. So there is lots of work to do for us still. Once we have reached the first goal, I just understand that it's a little step in between. And yeah, that's the direction we are going. So thank you from my side.
Thank you very much, Peter. Wonderful presentation. Now we're going to move now with Ryan Salgers. Please, Ryan, if you can start sharing your presentation while I am introducing you. Again, thank you very much, Peter. Ryan Salgers. Ryan, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, very nice. You can start sharing your presentation and connecting your video. Ryan is currently a senior product manager for NavBlue and flight planning, so flight planning systems, responsible for the execution of the product roadmap. Formerly, operations manager and dispatch for Calita, which is a cargo company based in the US. It's big aircrafts there. He was there for 15 years. And currently, and thank you again, because it's quite early in the morning in Michigan, and he's in Michigan. However, he belongs to the office in Ontario, Canada. So welcome. Thank you very much for being here, and the floor is yours, Ryan.
Thank you very much. So I'll jump into this quickly. We've had a couple of presentations already, and you're going to see much the same from us. So doing an overview of the way the NavBlue and flight planning system is addressing these new requirements. I'll do an overview of the rule changes. That'll be very quick because there have been many of those already today. How does NFP handle the fuel impact? How is NFP handling the weather minima, and what are our current timelines? Don't need to go into this with much detail. It's already been discussed multiple times on this call, but as the investigation on the NavBlue side was progressing, we noticed that the split of the variations in these schemas is roughly taking the existing fuel schema, separating it out, creating these variations. How does that impact the NFP offering? Well, the NFP offering was already set up with a functionality, the way we calculate our fuel policies, very much like a word problem, very much the options of if this, then that. So the way we are addressing this within NFP is that we will be asking customers to address any reserve policy changes that they have to establish. The goal being that NFP will continue to provide the variations. We can do the 5% of the planned trip fuel without issue. We can do the 5 minutes of hold without issue. We can do the 3% for the ERA. We can do the 20 minutes. It is a question of how is that operator allowed to calculate. We will like to provide a flexible tool that is able to be used by the operator and provide the benefits that they need. One item I'd like to point out is that when it comes to missed approach, we noticed that we were a little out of alignment with the regulation, but decided to make no change. The regulation specifically says to go with the missed approach altitude. NFP actually currently already does a full landing and full takeoff to ensure conservative calculation of fuel. On the off chance that it's not actually at your missed approach altitude that you have the issue, we want to make sure that you can execute the landing takeoff. If there's any issues on the approach, any additional fuel consumption is covered by that conservative view. So as general, being a little more conservative in the regulation is fine. So we're going to continue forward with that. We also, the basic scheme of variations, we have the ability to do the 3% ERA, the 20 minutes flying. Again, NFP currently set up that you tell us what your options are: 5% normal, 3% with ERA, and a minimum of 5% or 5 minutes holding at 1500. That is input into NFP, and we're able to calculate the fuel based on those situations. And it's flexible. There's no need to change the fuel policy flight by flight. It notices if you have an ERA, it notices if you do not. Speaking of the ERA, we took this moment to look back and confirm that the fuel ERA Aerodrome NFP has auto selection functionality for that. And we want to confirm that we meet all of those requirements, and we do. We continue to meet those requirements. So from the fuel planning standpoint, NFP is compliant from the beginning. There was not a lot of change needed. As has been mentioned a few times on this call, the timelines for making changes was short, so it was good that we were already in a position to meet that need. When it comes to the weather requirements, we know that the current minima is removed as of the 31st of October. We have the new minima coming live as of November. Unfortunately, as has been discussed, there's a lot of different players involved in this discussion. There's different rules, there's fuel rules, and at NavBlue, we were aware from early in the year of the changes in the fuel requirements, but unfortunately, the changes to the minimum requirements were not as well known and not escalated to us before actually June, July of this year was when we identified the minima changes were occurring as well. We had already confirmed that fuel was not an issue, but we found that minima would be. We found that by removing this table and introducing these new tables, NFP was going to be a little out of position. So luckily, my friend Francisco has copied the FAA for the most part with the basic fuel schema, and that is presented currently in the NFP functionality. So we will be able to provide some of the automated airport suitability minima checking that we do with NFP. We'll be able to provide that out of the box November 1st as it is with the basic fuel schema, using the FAA requirements, having the customers add the 200 and basically a half mile to type B instruments and 400 and basically a mile to type A instruments. That will be available on November 1st to any customers that are ready, have the approval, and are willing to go. As far as the tables that go from there, the basic fuel schema with variations for short haul and the basic fuel schema with variations for long haul, both of these need to be developed within our system. That is active development that is going on now, and we will be deploying it out to our customers for testing as soon as is possible. One of the things that I was able to confirm with Francisco is that you can use the fuel variations separate from the minima variations. So you can use an individual fuel schema and the basic fuel schema minima planet. it does not have to be one-to-one. So a customer that has the basic fuel schema can still take advantage, that has the basic fuel schema minima planning can still take advantage of the more elaborate fuel planning. They just won't have the lower visibility options. That will be available within NFP as soon as we can get it out. So what do those timelines look like as we're developing this? Where are we at? So we are deploying the basic as we roll out. So the basic schema is available today. No development is needed. The basic with variations is in development right now. And we are anticipating, if we can get it pushed out fast, testing in November and then live to our customers in January. If it does not make that release, it will be March and May. That is, again, for the basic with variations, which is the more elaborate, lower visibility options. The basic schema will be available when we roll out. If customers have the exemption, then we would have this for them when the exemption is complete. That is the end of my presentation. I'll stop sharing and I'm happy to answer any questions for me.
Thank you very much, Ryan. We're going to break just for 10 minutes. We have a 1-hour session on questions. Please, guys, keep in posting your questions in Slido. We have many questions. Probably we will not be able to answer all of the questions, to be honest. But okay, there's a few of them, especially the most popular ones that we will answer. Currently, the most popular one now is 28 hits regarding variations on 3%. We will answer later. So keep posting your questions, and if you don't have a question, please thumbs up to the question that you see more relevant. We see each other again at 3 o'clock, so in 10 minutes time from now. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
There's another one. Okay, guys, welcome back to the third session of this webinar, second webinar of EASA from Cologne. Wonderful day here. We have a very big panel. I will introduce each one of you as we move on through the questions. I will try to distribute the question as evenly as I can. We have a representative from IATA. We have, thank you, Silvia, for coming, from EASA Spain. Again, Lufthansa. We have Adina as well with us, and I will give the introduction to each one of you guys. So we're going to start with OCC, Peter. Just to set up the scene, we received several questions. John, I don't know which is the one that I should display.
So if we start that one, is there any requirement to approve the dispatch or operations control training?
Correct. And this is one, but we have another 2 or 3 questions very similar that we will start addressing that. So I was thinking to start first with the regulator.
Here's the other one. Is there any requirement to approve dispatch or operations control training in NCC operators?
Correct.
Specifically for NCC though. So
yeah, okay. So, but it's very similar. We need to address the first one and then maybe we will go again. So Adina, welcome. Adina is our expert, ground handling expert, being in EASA for many years. Welcome, Adina. So the first question is for you. So you are ready. John, I think is this one, and then we will display the other ones in the screen, but the floor is yours for this matter.
Thank you, Francisco. Good afternoon, everyone. Adina Soni is my name. Francisco did the introduction, so no need for me to do it. I will simply answer. So there's a short answer and there's a longer answer to this question. Is the training for the ops control, flight dispatchers, FOO personnel required to be approved? No, that's the short answer. There will never be any rule in Regulation 965 to say that. But what we know is the following. The training program for the flight operations officers and flight dispatchers has to be included in the OMD of the aircraft operator. And we know from some states that in some places this manual is reviewed part by part, chapter by chapter, section by section. However, the requirements, the Regulation 965 does not require a prior approval of this training. Anyway, if you read one of the new AMCs that was published in relation to the fuel amendment to the regulation, you will find that the elements of the training for flight operations officers, flight dispatchers, in other words, called operational control center personnel, is subject to this big fuel scheme that requires prior approval. So only within this context is the training for OCC personnel under the approval of the competent authority, but not separately, not independently, and with another nuance, namely that this is only related to the flight operation, to the ops control personnel involved in the fuel flight monitoring and flight watch functions. That's all we have today in the current rules.
Thank you, Adina. Thank you. We have certain operators here, and I would like to go to Peter. I mean, we have an introduction. Before you answer, I have to make you a personal question. So you are half Spanish, half German. We just recently have in basketball the Euro basket, you know, in the semifinals, Germany against Spain. What team do you wear?
Oh, that's an easy one. I'm going for Spain.
Good.
Wow. Absolutely no question about it. I was always, whether in football or in basketball, and actually I still do play basketball. Yeah, I was going with Spain.
Thank you very much, because you know I am as Spanish. So
No problem.
Now let's back to business. You heard the
Okay.
conversation, the explanation from Adina, OCC training approval. What's your thought, Peter?
It actually comes together with my experience from last week, because we last week had an NAA audit in our fleet management, and I was kind of asked if I could do a quick question and answers in the fleet management upstairs. And they asked me, okay, what is the training content? What's the syllabus? How are the dispatchers trained, etc. So this is something that's kind of new for us, because we usually, there was never a requirement, as Alina correctly said. So I was kind of surprised, but obviously in the content and the explanation of the auditor was exactly that one. He said, okay, since it's included in the OMD, therefore we need to have a look at your procedures and look in your books, etc., etc. So yeah, nevertheless, I mean, it's just a change of the procedure itself. So if the German or Dutch or Nordic CAA wants any information, we will obviously provide it, so to make things work. So there's yeah, it just concurs with what Alina says. Yeah, my experience with that.
Thank you, Peter. And there's another question related to the OCC for the NCC. Well, if for CAT, you know, if for CAT is not a pre-approval item, then obviously for NCC it's not. So thank you very much. I don't know if Thomas, I'm just thinking about you, just because you are also part of the operator, but I don't know if you have anything to say. Otherwise, I move on to the next question, please. This is common for all the panelists. If you want to intervene about a particular question, don't hesitate, raise your hand and just intervene. Thomas, anything else, or can I move to the next question?
I think you could move to the next question.
Thank you, Thomas.
Do you want to do this little bit about principles of flight requirement in training? How deep should they go?
We can do.
That's a simple thing. I would revert this question to the pilots, and I would also revert this question to if there are any people in the audience who are working for an ATO, because that's a question for you guys and girls. The EASA is not going to regulate the level of details for the principles of flight, and this is taken actually from the ICAO Annex 1 requirement. So this is a standard for the training of the FOO, and if you look at the syllabus for the training of the FOO, it's going to be, you will find that it's absolutely identical with the license for the PPL. So the principles of flight is one of the topics that is included today in the syllabus in ICAO Annex 1 for FOO. So that's all I have to say. I'm not going to go into details, but of course everybody should understand.
Yeah. So it's not an EASA requirement, it's an ICAO Annex 1 requirement. So.
And it's related to all the forces that apply to the aircraft for being lifted in the air. So that's
it's like clear basics. That sounds like
yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Adina, because that's why we, you know, she's the expert of ground handling. So okay, so we're going to move on to the next question. Let me see. There's a question from Ivan, has received a lot of, so I think I need to address. This one is probably for EASA. Yeah. Oh, Thomas, sorry, you want to intervene on this matter?
No, not an intervention. I just would have a point of view from the operator side, but you go first as regulator.
No, so you want to also intervene here on the 3%, correct?
Yes, that's it.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to make you a question before you need to answer a general question. But so let's read the question together. So hi, everyone. Do we need, Ivan, thank you very much for your question. Do we need to perform a risk assessment in order to apply the basic scheme with variation for the 3% contingency fuel? Apparently in the MPA, Alpha, EASA rules changed, and we did require in the past to do it. But now, you know, in the final AMC ED decision 005/2022 Romeo. So I say again, in case you want to search for this in Google, 2022 005 Romeo. It didn't go through, and in fact, I just explained in my presentation a few minutes ago, that the only requirement for 3% is basically a fuel consumption monitoring program. There's no need to do a risk assessment. That's the beauty of the variation. The regulator have done the risk assessment for you already, and we have given you a menu, a setup menu with the mitigating measures to apply, further efficiency or further flexibility from the basic fuel scheme. So I think it's done, but I'm going to give the floor regarding this matter. So by the way, my explanation is just from a regulatory point of view. We always recommend that when you go to a 3% to do risk assessment for any changes in the manual. But I guess, Thomas, you will address this. So I would like to introduce to Thomas, to the audience. He's a pilot of A340-330, and he's the project manager of fuel implementation in Lufthansa Group. Welcome, Thomas. Before you answer the question and you reply on my reply, I would like to ask you, what are the challenges in the industry with COVID now that, COVID is, let's say, in the back? Ahead, you have a difficult implementation probably for the winter, and not so difficult of the EASA regulation. I hope it's not so difficult. So anyway, what are your expected challenges for this winter, and with COVID in the back and EASA regulation coming in?
Okay, thank you very much, Francisco. Hello to everybody. Thank you for having me. I'm representing Jens Wörlin from Lufthansa, who is my superior and is in charge of the policy department within Lufthansa Group. I'm managing the project of the transition of the fuel and flight planning. What are the challenges? I think we have an astonishing time of stop and go in the past 2 years, where we kind of saw some light at the horizon last autumn, looking at the summertime with more flights. Then again, a new COVID wave came up. So I guess this led a lot of operators to really make some thoughts about how to restructure and to size down the cost basis, which I see that wherever we could, there's also pensions were conducted. People have left, and now we are faced with a excellent drive up of operations and people wanting to travel, and this gives us a very thin basis of professionals with know-how to tackle the daily business, to ramp up operations, and to implement such a new fuel and flight planning rule. So quite some challenges lying ahead, but let's all hope and keep our fingers crossed that COVID is really in the past. This should not come over again next winter. Let's hope so. So to the question from Ivan, Francisco has already talked about the regulatory aspect. What I wanted to put in here as an operator is we looked at the issues, at the single issues, as Peter pointed them out, the single changes that would come now with the fuel planning. And we looked at it from the perspective, what is new for us? What is a change? And there where we saw a change, it was in our own interest to make a risk assessment, to evaluate the threats that we could encounter on the way. So now at this example of 3% contingency fuel, most of us probably have had this already. And so we didn't associate a threat with this concise planning method. But I remember that we made, for example, a risk assessment on the issue of the ERA and fuel ERA, overall perspective, which airports will have, which minimas, which won't. And also on some other things that were specific to our operation. And so I will put it this way, as Francisco said, I didn't see any specific requirement to make a risk assessment on the regulation. That is at least what my interpretation was. But we saw certain things which changed, and therefore we were interested to make the risk assessment on our own, to have the picture, to see the threats clearly.
Thank you, Thomas. Yes, it was very good intervention. As one thing is the regulatory aspect, and another one is the best practice. we will always, as best practice, recommend you any changes to the manual, to the procedures to do a risk assessment. However, as pure regulatory and being, I am not a lawyer, but if I were a lawyer, that's the reply I gave. Together with Thomas, thank you very much. We're going to move on to the next question. I think it's going to be for Peter, and well, we'll see other people that could intervene. Is regarding, can you clarify what kind, it's about the communication of the OCC. Can you clarify what kind of communication between aeroplane and OCC is required in the definition of flight monitoring? Remember that we explained flight monitoring in the last, in the first webinar. We had, extensive presentation around that. One of the requirements is to have communication between the flight crew and the personnel on the ground. So is communication from OCC to ATC to aeroplane okay? So there are two questions. I don't know if any one of you want to intervene. I guess I would like to hear from Peter, because you are the expert in OCC. I don't know if you are ready to intervene or you would like to intervene. Maybe Thomas later. But anyway, just to check, Peter, are you happy to intervene here?
Well, yeah, I can try. Actually, that question popped up with my colleagues as well. What happens if there is a communication issue, that we have some technical item on an aircraft that makes it kind of difficult for us to communicate with it? Obviously, looking into the past, it was not that big of a deal. So if you couldn't text with the aircraft via ACARS or via the means of communication that there are, well, it was that basically a statement. That was it. You couldn't communicate, and that's it. Now, obviously, what I think is that looking a bit further, I think it has implications, and I would, since obviously the means of communication that you need are, for me, described in the airspaces that you're moving through. So the airspace requirements define the communication requirements. And whenever if there is a technical issue, what you do is you fail to comply with flight monitoring. That's how I see it. That's what we want to aim for. Actually, we want to go for, as I said, AMC 9. And since you're not complying with AMC 9 with that specific aircraft, I would go then, even for in the means to be on the safe side, I would then go for 5% contingent fuel in this big context of the new fuel schemes. Then basically, since I cannot provide one thing, then I need to come up with a contingency plan, and that is then giving the crew more fuel. So that will be my my approach to this. I would understand that a communication from the OCC to an aircraft needs to be direct. That's my personal opinion on this. So whether it is via data link or satellite voice com or ACARS, I don't think that a communication via ATC, just like I call you on the phone and tell you what you have to tell the crew, is for me a reliable source of communication. I don't know if any of the other colleagues have a different opinion on it, but that's at least what I would say is there would be a clear line. For me, direct communication is an essence.
Thank you, Peter. I will give the floor. So my idea is to give the floor to Thomas from Lufthansa, and then give the floor to Francesco, the chair of the rulemaking group, let's say to summarize, and if needed. So Thomas, welcome again. The floor is yours.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question, and I think it's interesting to see that actually the fact of what is required is not specified expressly in the EASA rule set, right? They refer to the Doc 9976 from ICAO, where you will find in the chapter 5, you will find the more descriptive chapter of what communication is meant. Personally, I would also say, I would feel it is a direct communication. And now the interesting thing is, we're talking about basic fuel scheme with variations against the individual fuel scheme, right? In the individual fuel scheme, you need a second set of communication to really make sure this communication is in there everywhere and all the time, while you do not need this requirement in the basic fuel scheme with variation. So, this means that, or for me, as an interpretation, you could also come to the conclusion saying, as long as you have this basic mean of communication, you are good enough to work in the basic fuel scheme with variation setup. And if in the one time it fails, then you have your MAL, which gives you some requirements, which is not now what we talk about, but otherwise, you could also assume, all right, for the single case, an operation with another method of communication, maybe the one that has just been mentioned now via ATC to the crew, for a single case exceptionally, which is in problems, maybe you could think that this could suit the single case. Why am I bringing in this thought? Also, when we look at the minimas, we have this AMC 6 and AMC 9, right? Where the AMC 9 requires a low visibility operations approval. So this low visibility operations approval is an approval you receive for a fleet and for an AOC. Now, what happens when the single aircraft is not capable one day due to MEL to be low visibility operations approved? This is also one thing where the basic fuel scheme with variations does not address. It does not say if one aircraft is not capable, you cannot apply AMC 9er. So there is space for interpretation there, and I'm really, interested in Francisco what he can add on to give us more clarity into this item.
Okay, now I have the microphone off. Thank you very much, Thomas. We have other questions very similar. I just want to, from an anonymous, I just want to read before I give the floor to Francesco to, let's say, summarize all these ideas. It's just pop up there in regards to flight planning, basic variation, flight monitoring. EASA needs to clarify what can seen as an adequate communication system, VHF, okay, ATC, okay. So it's very similar, Francesco.
Okay.
If you can summarize, remember that in the ICAO 9976, Thomas, remind me the point in the ICAO, but I think there's something about this, no? Correct?
Yeah, the chapter 5.420, communication systems. That's where they kind of give a picture of possible solutions.
Okay, so I give the floor to the chair of the rulemaking group to kind of close this question.
Yes. So interesting discussions indeed. Of course, the more we attempt, all these stakeholders attempt the implementation of these new regulations, the more questions will pop up. And therefore, not only the webinars, but also there will be an implementation support through the authorities primarily, which they will ask us. And we'll probably find some loopholes that we need to close. With regard to the last intervention by Thomas, yes, indeed, for the performance-based fuel scheme, individual fuel scheme, you need to have direct communication with the aircraft. And the intent of the regulation is that you should have it at all time, meaning that you have to have a backup system. That's why you have two systems to be accounted for. And I think that the link, so the second question that was asked is the OCC to ATC communication enough? The answer is no, because we cannot rely on a third party that we don't control. Of course, if you revert to the basic scheme, also with variations, you have a less. You are operating in a let's say in an environment with more safety margin, let's say, and therefore we can afford also the fact that we dispatch with one system and we have that system failing, and then the contingency fuel that we have, which will be more than the normal, okay, or more than on the individual scheme, will allow the crew to compensate for such a loss. With regard to the dispatch requirements, this is an overarching principle that basically every approval is linked to a certain, usually all of the approvals are linked to certain equipment to be functioning, okay? And if there is a requirement to have an RVO approval, because that is basically the one of the safety nets that we put in to allow a more aggressive fuel scheme, then if that approval is not granted, then it's easy case. So that is not something to argue. But what Thomas said, if that approval is not actually, cannot be exercised, okay, the privileges of those approvals cannot be exercised, then the intent of the regulation should be read in a sense that if you don't have the safety net, you cannot have the corresponding safety margin, you know, reduced. So if you cannot exercise the approval, then basically you are in a no-go situation, and you should have a dispatch requirement that clearly states to the OCC personnel also, not only the captain, that in that case a regular 5% or whatever is allowed should be the baseline.
Thank you, Francesco. Yes, this is our recommendation. Remember, guys, that we have a captain, we have experts in the operator, and although this is not specifically regulated, because we don't say, we just simply talk about the flight monitoring capability. When this happens on the actual operation, then we have a captain that needs to take decision. We have a flight dispatcher, and remember, to embrace this thing as an operator, you have the power to decide what to do in that case, because it's not specifically regulated, or when you are flying and then you lost flight monitoring, then you need to return. No, we don't say that. It's open. It's open for you, and you guys will need to decide on a case-by-case basis. I am sharing the content. I was looking to make sure that all panelists, let's say, participate. I see a question for NavBlue or the service provider. So therefore, before going into that question, I would like to introduce both of you to Ryan, who just made a presentation. Sorry, I go back to the.
I just highlighted the question.
Can you highlight the question? Thank you. So in a moment,
it's coming in a second.
It will come in a second. But while we put the question highlighted so everybody can see, I would like to say hello to Ryan again. And, just a question, because you are in Michigan. So it's, thank you for being, because it's probably very early in the morning. So again, thank you very much for being here today with us. I have one personal question before we go into the detailed question, technical question, and a professional question. So how you traveling? Because you say you are between Michigan and Canada. So your office in Canada, you live in Michigan. How you traveling between the two places?
It's very, very interesting, especially during COVID. So I took this position in 2016 with NavBlue, and the home office is Ontario, Waterloo, Ontario. I'm based outside of Detroit, Michigan, and it's like a 3-hour drive for me, which is not that long of a drive to me. So when necessary, I will go over to the Waterloo office on a Monday or a Sunday night, 3-hour drive, stay there for however many days I need to for that, and then drive home. As I said, took the job in 2016. It was a nice change from being in the ops center to be work from home with occasional travel. And then when COVID happened and the border locked down, I suddenly became a man on an island. I was not far from any of my team. We could almost go to the border and wave at each other on opposite sides of the Detroit River, but it was forbidden for me to go across. So for the better part of a year and a half, Ontario had a pretty firm lockdown. For the first year, I could not go over. After that, I had to do very specific requirements, get approvals and pre-clearances, start going to the office and rekindling that. But very interesting, not just crossing and having a long drive, but having an international border in between.
Yeah, I can imagine, like many of you guys. So Ryan, first for you, and if Kai is available from Lido, maybe it's not exactly for you, but it should be related. So if you want to complement Kai after Ryan, then you are welcome. So NAVBLUE, how NAVBLUE calculates the additional fuel. Reference is required by the type of operation. It shall be the amount of fuel to enable the aeroplane to land at fuel energy en route alternate aerodrome in the event of the aircraft failure that at the most critical point along the route. And here he's copying, pasting exactly the regulation. So can you give us a short briefing of the NAVBLUE calculations regarding the additional fuel? I don't know if you can remember, the additional fuel is for the critical fuel scenario is 15 minutes. I briefly discussed this there. I don't know if you need more time, Ryan.
I think I need to understand the question a little more, just for the interpretation. Is this the within an hour of a fuel ERA, having a fuel alternate within an hour of your route all the way along, or is this more about holding?
Yeah, so it goes, there's a requirement in the regulation that you need to calculate the critical point along the route. So there are, when you have an engine failure or the pressurization, there's a point in the route. It could be that there's a point in the route, especially when you depart with very low weights and you can climb very quickly to a very high altitude, and you are doing, I don't know, Madrid, somewhere in the US, there's a point called critical point in the route where if you have an engine failure or the pressurization, you will basically not have enough fuel to divert. So then this critical point is calculated, and then there's a requirement that you need to ensure that you have fuel plus 15 minutes. Thomas is the expert, because I remember having discussions about the critical point, the great circle, the loxodromic, the orthodromic route, etc. But basically, I don't know, Thomas, because you participated, we did together part of the regulation, but I think I explained correctly, Ryan. I don't know if you need more time, because obviously it's a very, very, very technical, and here on the spot, being able to remember this, I will be surprised, but I don't know, Ryan.
Let me answer what functions we have that could support this. Again, it's NFP is a toolbox. We have configurations that we set up so that customers can make the system that they want, the configuration that works for them. So along the route of flight, we're constantly evaluating to make sure that we are processing for those most critical points, whether it's terrain or whatever. Every flight within NFP, the entire route is evaluated, and we do have the ability for the operators to specify an amount of holding fuel that they need to have along that escape. That is one thing that we can do to ensure this. The other is that as part of the reserve policy, we do have a built-in 15 minutes of hold at basically top of descent, using that top of descent fuel flow at a point along the route that we've burned through, gotten through, so we can ensure that we have that fuel flow available for the additional holding as you need that. Everything that I had heard as far as the requirement, I can think of something that NFP has to meet the need, but as this is kind of on the spot, I'm open to more questions about it to maybe confirm. But I believe that through those three aspects, the fact that we are constantly evaluating to ensure that you are within an hour of a suitable airport. That if you are not, we engage our extended operations planning right away. At all sections of the route, we are evaluating for critical diversion issues for oxygen and terrain, the entire route that is being done. And we have the ability for you to specify how much additional hold you want to have at your escape airport. So that could be your 15 minutes from the critical departure or deviation point. And then last and finally, an overall holding. So if Kai would like to answer, that's fine. I agree that this should not be specific to any one operator or any one solution. Just in general, with these changes, how is it being handled?
Yeah, Ryan, you are correct. You said the 15 minutes, you say oxygen, etc. So you are quite a spot there. Thank you very much. There's another service provider, Kai Oldman. He's a specialist in Lido flight planning system. I'm not going to make you any question about where you live or that kind of thing. Don't worry. Kai, just to let the audience know, he participated with us in the development of the regulation. Before COVID, we were facing face-to-face. Now, unfortunately, we need to see each other through these screens that sometimes are even more efficient. So I know it's not addressed totally for you today, but I would like that you address as well a little bit of how Lido calculates this critical point scenario, and maybe because you were part of the rulemaking group, you know exactly the part of the regulation, and maybe you can, complement Ryan. So Kai, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks, Francisco. Thanks a lot for the invitation to this webinar. This is an interesting topic, this critical point along the route. So this part of the regulation just mandates that anywhere on the route you have to be able to divert to your escape or diversion airport. When you're outside 60-minute circles, then you have even more restrictive, let's say, requirements to those airports. Within 60 minutes, let's say let's say for Lido flight planning system, let's say the operator has a choice whether he would like to calculate these points and these fuel also, let's say within 60-minute circles. And so then the system would calculate, then let's say critical points, decision points between en route airports, and calculate let's say this diversion fuel, converting the 50 minutes holding at the destination or at the escape airport. And then
what seat would you
then let's say have the available information for the flight crew. So it is possible that it's kind of operator choice if you want to check this also, let's say on really short haul flights, even on a flight, let's say between Munich and Cologne. But let's say it's operator choice to say if he wants to do it or not.
I actually have a question. Did I hear properly? You're creating almost like an ETP between the route and the diversion airport at each diversion point. If you cannot create the 60-minute circle, you're creating an ETP kind of off of that immediately.
So more or less, yes, yeah. So outside 60 minutes, you have to do it as well. It's ETOPS, it's EDTO, and within 60 minutes, let's say it's optional. So if the operator or if the user, the dispatcher mandates it, then en route airports are, let's say, selected along the route, and the fuel scenario will be checked.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I don't know if anybody wants to intervene and say something else. Otherwise, I move on. I will keep the flight service providers because they are here. We have a question regarding the fuel tankering, and I know that Lido and we're going to display it right now in 1 second. If we use fuel tankering, where do you consider it should be assigned extra fuel? And please clarify. We are talking about fundamentally economical reasons. From a regulatory point of view, we don't mandate a specific place, and this is up to the authority, to the operator, and to the service provider. But I guess Thomas, NavBlue, and Lido, they have, you know, that you guys probably have implemented this in a particular way. As I said, from a regulatory point of view, and I put my lawyer hat, I am not a lawyer, but if I would put my regulator hat specifically, is open for you to decide. So I see many hand raised. I don't know who wants to intervene first. I'm going to just start with Ryan. It's just because it pops up first, but I will, Thomas, I will also would like that you intervene, and Kai as well. So Ryan, how you implement the tankering in your flight planning system? I don't know if you are ready to answer. Eh?
Oh, no, it's very, very straightforward. My answer is the same as yours. It is flexible. It is dependent upon the regulator, the operator, and the use case. What we offer is the ability for you to tanker, whether it's economic, strategic, however whatever the reason that you want to carry extra gas. Then you have the ability to put that in there. We have the ability to make comments about it. As far as how it's presented, that's a format issue with the flight plan. Really what we're coming down to is this question is really about the operator and their regulator and the use case. As far as, at least from a flight planning service provider, I will have 4 operators with the same regulator that do this differently. It depends on their use case.
Thank you very much. Peter, as well. So Peter, if you want to intervene, then I give Kai, and then you close, Thomas, okay? So Peter.
The tankering fuel, as Ryan said, we have defined it from an operator perspective. What we did is we decided, obviously there are 2 perspectives on it. You can have the economical tankering for just solely basically money reasons, and the other one is for operational reasons. Nevertheless, we decided to go for, if it is just for tankering reasons, we just go for a discretionary fuel. So we included the discretionary fuel, and the crews then can decide if they want to take that amount or they want to reduce the amount. For us, the concept of the extra fuel is not that new, because we always had something that we call company fuel, and that is specific for MEL changes, or if there are unforeseen things like industrial action somewhere or bad weather situation here. So for us, it was just a name change, but nevertheless, all the tankering issues, what refers to tankering, is only discretionary fuel. That's how we have defined it. And if the crews want to take less, then obviously they have instructions to call us in dispatch, and we will rerun then the flight plans with the actual takeoff with the actual fuel amounts that the crew wants to carry.
Thank you.
So we don't want to bind any crew member to a specific fuel amount.
Thank you. Remember my explanation of what I said, the intention of discretionary fuel. It's a personal opinion. I would, because if I want to assess the intention of the discretionary fuel is solely to the commander. So if we want to check let's say the culture in the airline, then when you put a lot of tankering, then we don't know whether it was really the crew wanted to put discretionary or not. So and it's a personal opinion, Peter, if I would choose if I have to choose between the 2, I would prefer extra fuel, but it's just a personal opinion on my side. So, as I said before, from a legalistic point of view, it's up to you. Maybe Thomas wants to say something and maybe contradict me, like I did, and start a discussion. I would like to give the floor to Kai first, Thomas. So Kai, the floor is yours from Frankfurt.
Yeah, thanks a lot. That's a really interesting question, and quite philosophical question, which is actually let's say from our point of view, operator decision. I think within Lido we have more than 70 customers, and it feels like that we have more than 100 different interpretations of this issue. And actually, let's say it's the operator should decide how to name it. So the fuel tankering, so the tankering fuel, let's say it's not a mandatory fuel in such a case, so it's not needed to operate this flight. And the extra fuel right now got let's say, a special meaning with regard to the foreseen circumstances, anticipated delay, weather situation. So the tankering fuel would not actually fit in there. Yeah, so it's, let's say, Lido is offering then to let the operator to decide, let's say, how to name it and where to include it. And that's actually also what the regulation is, let's say, not prohibiting.
Yeah, I agree. Again, is my, if I need to choose between the two, I said what I said, but I also said, and I absolutely agree with you that unfortunately, tankering is not also a recommended practice. If we talk about environment protection, we are carrying, we are polluting the environment unnecessary for an economic reason, which can be fair, but all the green movement is moving into the direction that we should be careful with the tankering. So I recommend the operators to think about this, the environmental impact. Thomas, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Yes, I think the question here is operational or economical reason in one question. So the operational reason is actually some kind of deterioration of the flight, which you anticipate, or as Kai said, expect. So for us, the extra fuel has a reason. There is a reason behind it, as Peter said, industrial action, expected at destination aerodrome, or one runway closed and the advice via NOTAM or somewhere else that you may expect delay. So this is also what we consider extra fuel. We also had it as company fuel beforehand already. I think it also matches the regulator's intention, right? Because from an investigation point of view, you make a flight plan, and then you want to maybe see which kind of accounted threats were already in there. And that is what the extra fuel is there for. It's for an additional anticipated possible threat. So yes, that is extra fuel. And the discretionary fuel, when we talk about economical tankering, if we do it, because as Francisco said, right now with the fuel price and environmental issues, it's been reduced a lot. But if we consider it, then this economical fuel is in the discretionary fuel. Why? If you look at the next question, okay, it goes with it, because it says, is extra fuel required to be part of minimum fuel? Okay, now it's where it gets interesting, because discretionary fuel is never part of the minimum fuel, meaning that's where actually some additional fuel as economical tankering could be placed. But an anticipated delay is part of the flight planning. So, and now it's from here on, it's interpretation, right? It's part of the flight planning. For me, during the flight planning stage, extra fuel is part of the minimum required fuel. And now, and this is also an interesting stage, Francisco, that we didn't touch actually now, commencement of flight, because commencement of flight has changed. We used to think in the terms of commencement of takeoff, and that has been changed in the wording in the EASA rules, offering some kind of flexibility there for weather considerations and fuel considerations. So for me, once the flight is commenced, the extra fuel gets another meaning, saying, this is a reserve. As Francesco pointed out earlier, we have reserves to cater for problems that we encounter in flight. So the extra fuel is one part of this reserve to cater for problems and can be adapted to the situation. If I have fuel along with me for an industrial action in London Heathrow, for example, but I hear that this industrial action is stopped and that the operation is normal, this fuel can be used for something else. So, it's quite a package of thoughts.
Thank you very much. Remember on my presentation, Point Bravo on CATO PMPA, so AMC1 and the CATO PMPA 181 Point Bravo in the new operational conditions. One is anticipated delay. This is related to extra fuel. Very well done. I would like to give the floor to close this question, which we started with the other question, and now we transition to this question because it's kind of leading in the same argument. So from an anonymous 19 hits, CATO PMPA Point Charlie, is extra fuel required to be part of the minimum required fuel? Is discretionary fuel required to be part of the minimum required fuel? Just a reminder to the table. Thomas has answered. The chair of the rulemaking group, welcome again. Francesco, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Interesting discussion. Of course, the discretionary fuel is by definition addressed by the commander and is not part of the minimum fuel that is planned at the OCC level. In the end, the captain can decide to go away with the minimum fuel or to add something else based on his sole discretion. And here we had several examples of companies making a program for their captains to exercise this discretionary fuel privilege, let's say, in the most efficient way. And I think this is legitimate from the operators to require that their crews, their piloting command, the commanders are using this resource as a company resource. And on the other hand, the commanders, finally responsible for the flight, they need to have some freedom in exercising their discretion because they are ultimately responsible and they are the one on board of the aircraft. With regard to the extra fuel, the new now, of course, from the legacy fuel schemes, the extra fuel is now called discretionary, and extra fuel now is instead part of the minimum fuel. It's something that the planning system should cater for. So the operator, for instance, if you know already that there are 15 minutes delay in or 30-minute delay in JFK because there is an FAA alert on that, then you should have those 30 minutes not on the discretionary fuel of the captain, but you should have it in the extra fuel.
Correct.
And you should not dispatch if you have less than that, because you know that there will be at least 30 minutes delay. Yeah. And we know that as a former long-range pilot, I know that usually there are more. If they say 30, probably it's 45.
Yeah.
So this is something that I think that in the rulemaking task discussions, we address specifically this distinction between what is mandated and what is not. Yeah. So extra fuel is minimum fuel, discretionary is not.
Correct, and this is an approach not invented by us. Suddenly we wake up. ICAO is also inferring to that with the document 9976. So, so we're going to continue. I would like to maybe to try that also the authorities participate a little bit, especially Gabriel. I don't know, Gabriel and Silvia. This is a very tricky question for you because it's about acceptance or not acceptance, and I don't know if you probably have your experts in this matter. You know, I would like to put to the floor this AMC6 CATO PMPA 181 Charlie 3 specifies a minimum of 2 years continuous operation recording for the statistical contingency fuel for a particular city pair and aeroplane combination. I passed through a little bit in my presentation. Some operators can have 10 flights during the period and some have 100 during these 2 years. How we can interpret this? So I'm going to go to the regulation. In the regulation, we say two things. We say that it's 2 years, but also we mention about, I can't remember now the wording by heart, but we say that in this particular case, you need to have enough statistical, enough quantity. We refer that is statistically relevant. I think we use is the wording. We need to check is in cutoff PMPA 181, and we can check later. So this is a change from the previous. That's why in my presentation I said that in the statistical contingency fuel we were kind of light improvements on this, moving things from GM to AMC. And one of the points that we addressed, probably in the GM, if I remember well, is about, okay, these 2 years, right, but we need to discuss about the statistic, the relevance. With 10 flights in 2 years, obviously you are not meeting the intent of the regulator. But I would like to give the floor to the authority. I don't know, Gabriel, because it's a on the spot question. If you have an operator that comes to you with only 10 flights, how would you deal? I am not putting in the spot that you need to reject or accept, because there are more factors than just the 10 flights to assess, and the maturity of the operator and everything. But how would you feel about having an operator with 10 flights and with the 2 years but only 10 flights? Gabriel.
Okay, thank you. I think that this should be just affording a case-by-case basis, of course. So for sure, I would not be confident, I would not be happy if an operator just has the data corresponding to 10 flights. I think that the common sense requires something else. So regarding the statistical fuel contingency, I didn't have time just to look for the right rule, but I can remember that it's included in a kind of guidance material specifying, like, let's say, an example of what could be a case of acceptable means of statistical contingency fuel. So we have right now experience only with an operator. Let's say that we are negotiating the conditions and the requirements that are acceptable for us and for him. So I think this is something that could be open, because it depends of the context and the situation of the operator. For instance, the rule says you need to have data corresponding to 2 years, but right now, if you go for the data of 2020, perhaps those data are not relevant, because in this year, due to the COVID, the amount of flights were minimum. So perhaps we cannot consider the data of this year as valid in order to validate this model of statistical fuel contingency. So to summarize, we think it's something just to study in a case-by-case basis.
Thank you, Gabriel. I found the correct term. It wasn't statistical relevance or whatever. I don't know what I said before, but it's sufficient data is required to be statistically significant. That is specifically included in the AMC. Now it's up to the authority to decide whether 10 is statistically relevant. It's 20, it's 100, or it's 200, but and it's a discussion between the operator, right, Francesco?
I think that it's a very interesting discussion, and of course, with this performance-based requirement and schemes, we cannot actually write everything, because sometimes by writing we cut off a number of operations that could be allowed, because there is a specificity that needs to be addressed locally by the operator and the corresponding authority. I invite the authorities and the operator to go deeper, if not already done, in the document 9976. Not only on that part of establishing the baseline performance, but there are some parts of the manual which address the use of quantitative and qualitative data. And there are some considerations that could help the operator in building the case with the authority to have the sufficient statistically meaningful data points to support the baseline performance.
Thank you, Francesco. Thomas, we need to start closing. It's 4 o'clock and we need to close, but please go ahead, and then I would like to say goodbye later on. So Thomas, the floor is yours.
Okay, I'll just make it quick. I saw the reference that we have in the ICAO for that. ICAO is more like EG mentioning, right? They say 1 or 2 years, 60 to 100 flights, and we have chosen for 2 years. Now, from my point of view, it makes sense, right? Because it's not only the amount of flights, but it's also the amount of seasons, okay? You have a winter season, you have a summer season, which might be very diverse and different. So it does make sense to have 2 seasons in your program before you can go. But that would be just an additional thought, which we don't see it in the regulation. Maybe that was a thought why they said 2 years.
Yeah, I agree.
Tom, indeed, that was one of the root causes of choosing 2 years in the rulemaking group.
Yeah,
the seasons.
The seasons, yeah, correct. Okay, guys, I'm gonna start closing. I'm gonna go one by one with you to say goodbye. The last question, and it's going to be very quickly, guys, because we don't have more time. Can you please clarify what is the fuel consumption monitoring system requirements, especially if the operator does not have a fixed airport network? The fact that you have a fixed airport network or not is not a criteria to say that you don't have a fuel consumption monitoring system.
Airframe engine.
Correct. It's airframe engine specific. There's a couple of requirements that I would like to highlight. First is the GM1 cutoff PMPA 181. There's a point, I think it's point Charlie. I am doing this by heart, so I'm sorry if I'm making a mistake, but there's a GM1 cutoff PMPA 181 that address this. Point Charlie, I am right. I am just looking at the regulation. Point Charlie fuel consumption monitoring system, you have their references. Then there's an AMC 8 cutoff PMPA 181, which is only for individual fuel schemes. So again, I don't know if you are basic of individual. Look, if you are basic to the Charlie on GM1 cutoff PMPA 181. If you are individual, go to the AMC 8 cutoff PMPA 181. Further information in the ICAO document 9976, Appendix 5, Chapter 5, you have there an example for a fuel consumption monitoring program. And again, it's airframe engine combination, not a fixed airport network. So I'm going to start saying goodbye. I'm really sorry because Stefano, I really didn't found the right place to give you a chance to speak. Stefano Prola, IATA Flight Ops Manager Europe. Are you there? I hope you are still there.
Yes.
I'm going to make you a question which is open. It's not that specific for you. It's what is your forecast for 2023 in IATA? And to say thank you for participating here and goodbye. So the floor is yours.
So, well, thanks, Francisco. Not a problem. There's been very interesting discussion. So, and I learned a lot myself. So, well, the forecast is not so good, unfortunately. There's been gone to there's many factors that can be taken in consideration. So, I mean, it's a bit more pessimistic than it was before. So, and looking to reach pre-COVID back in 2024, maybe not earlier, but there's so many factors. There's one thing that related more to the things to close the reference you made at the beginning, mention IATA documentation about this, and then document 9976, there are 3 IATA documents referenced. You have to say though, unfortunately, there is one that is actually fuel efficient program implementation guidance material of 2011 that is not being updated. We have a lot of documentation on fuel, but on the fuel quality, handling, and all that stuff. On the fuel actual efficiency, we have courses, we have training, but what we don't have that anymore. But the rest is there. Of course, we have EASA and parts of embedded in EASA. So, but Thanks anyway. Very interesting workshop. Thanks.
Thank you, thank you. And in fact, some of the requirements that Adina used for the OCC as well, and the training of the personnel comes from the documentation of IATA, and it's important to promote safety material of all bodies, including an IATA. So, Stefano, again, thank you very much for coming here. Okay, see you another time. I see you in the webinar for all weather operation in October. You know, and I hope that you can do the standard present. You know, you've been presenting in every webinar, so let's see if you can make a presentation as well there. Thank you very much, Stefano. Peter, next, thank you very much again for being here. Just to close this, how is your winter season approaching? What are you doing there? And thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you guys from EASA. Thanks for having me. It was really a pleasure to be in this forum. Interesting conversation and interesting questions, absolutely. How will our winter look like? So in winter, we start our training season to not only this fuel energy training, we do our refresher trainings there. And in winter, we do our FAM flights, etc., etc. So it will probably not be as busy as in summer, but from a training perspective, there's lots of things to do. And then obviously what the normal ops for winter is, well, we just change up the flights, you know, instead of going to Mallorca, we just go into the ski destinations, and instead of going to Cancun, we go and then to Asia, if it's possible. So yeah, it's an ongoing work. But yeah, as I said, thank you for having me. It was really beautiful to be.
Thank you to you. Muchas gracias. Y una paella.
Muchas gracias a ti.
La próxima. Una paella. Venga, saludos. Adina as well. Okay, thank you very much. Hi, again, thank you very much. Thank you from Cologne, Frankfurt. We are close by, but for these years and COVID, we haven't seen each other face to face. Again, thank you very much for coming here. How things are going with Lido? For you know, how you guys are going, and thank you very much for being here.
Yeah, Francisco, thanks for the invitation, and also here for the second webinar. Yeah, things at Lido are, let's say, times are busy. So October is coming close, end of October. So the colleagues are, yeah, developing or implementing then the new rules in the system. There are lots of tests are running also with our customers directly, final acceptance tests and so on. And yeah, so it's tough times, but also interesting times. Always a good challenge.
Thank you, Thomas. Sorry, thank you, Kai. Thomas, again, it was a pleasure to have you here. You know, we learn a lot from your expertise, Thomas. Yes, you know, and for you in Canarias, I don't know, un mojo picón or something. Okay. So,
thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure. And also, you know, we have the privilege as Lufthansa Group that we are hosted by Lido. So the whole work they are putting in there is going now on to our to good for us. So yeah, we're happy about that. Thanks a lot. Thanks for having us.
Gracias, Tomás, otra vez.
A ti, hasta luego.
Y nos vemos en Canarias, a ver si se puede. Ciao. Ryan, thank you very much again. Thank you for being there from Michigan. You know, I don't know because I don't see you, but anyway, you know, just what is your vision for 2023, just to close the session?
So
in NavBlue.
Yeah, we are continuing forward with our vision to accelerate a new platform that is trying to take on as much new technology as is possible. We began this as an evolution of our flight planning system before COVID, but COVID gave us the opportunity to kind of reassess, and that's the big driving force as NavBlue as a whole, trying to put as much as is possible behind the development of our unified way forward, really so that the technology gets out of the way. One of the things that we've talked about on this call a lot is timelines. New requirements come out and they have to be addressed, they have to be developed, we have to do things about it. And Kai, I'm sure, can nod with me and say, yeah, that's one of the biggest issues we have.
Oh, yes.
And it would be great if we could say, oh, that's the new requirement, copy, paste, and now the machine does the new thing. So that's the world we want to get to. And the technology is getting better and better. But as an industry, I think we can all say that aviation as an industry has not taken advantage of the technological advancements the last 20, 30, 40 years. So we're trying to catch up as fast as we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Gabriel, from the Spanish Authority, thank you for being here. Muchas gracias otra vez.
Gracias, Francisco.
I don't know, just to close, you know, because we were about fuel, etc. Are you planning in Spain to approve any, you know, operator with electric propulsion like Pipistrel or others, or you know, from the 30th of October?
I like to have a kind of such an operator. It could be an interesting experience, but I'm afraid so far we have to continue with the fueled airplanes. So let's see in the future.
Okay, yes. At the moment, we only have one type, so there
Yes.
are other countries that are approving electric propulsion and discussing about you know, this matter. But okay, thank you very much, Gabriel, again for being here today. And then Adina, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to have you here. We have our helicopter expert, Eric Bennett. At the end, he replied directly to the questions online, so it was great. Thank you, Eric, for being there. Silvia Troncoso, Head of Ops from EASA. Again, thank you very much for joining us. I'm Francesco Gaetani. Thank you.
Thank you.
You can. I leave the closing a little bit closing for you.
Thanks. And it was a great exchange between professionals. It's good to see that operators, regulators are in the same room, virtual room, to discuss this topic, and with a forward-looking attitude and safety-minded, which is really a pleasure. And I guess that we need to close with John Franklin, with who made all of this possible, relentlessly working on safety promotion from the EASA side. And we believe that this is a powerful tool to follow up the implementation and to ensure proper implementation of the rules. So thanks a lot, John. Okay, keep it up.
Fantastic. Thanks very much. And yeah, thanks to all my colleagues, because they do all the hard work. All I do here is press buttons and choose the right camera and kind of make it all work. So they do all the content. A huge thanks to them. Huge thanks to all the panelists that joined us. As I said, we will put everything on the event page in the coming days. We'll send an email to everybody's participants, to everybody's email addresses who'd registered when it's online. So you should get that certainly by early next week. Continue to follow our AirOps community, and we look forward to seeing you at another of our webinars very soon. Thanks very much. Have a great day and enjoy the rest of your week. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye,
everybody.
Adios.